explain that passage in 1 Corinthians 11 that talks about a woman's hair being her covering. This person said it's always confusing, and I was like, it is always confusing. I asked my husband, and he's like, you should go read the Got Questions thing, because they always have really good understanding of it. And so I did go over and read that a little bit, and still I was a little bit confused. I was like, God, I'm going to go to 1 Corinthians 11 and please give me some wisdom, because as I read through it, I feel like there's more unknowns than there are knowns. It's like 1 John, and you're like, what even? I don't know, God, when you get here, maybe you can explain that a little bit better. But there are some things in there that are a little bit more easily understood, and I'm going to go over that. So I actually really like this passage, especially verse 3, 1 Corinthians 11:3, where it says, and the head of every man is Christ, and the head of every woman is not head of every woman. The head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. And I love that passage because it shows the equality of genders, but yet the differences in roles on earth, because Christ is equal to God. They're the same. And then even later on in verses 11 and 12, it says, for the woman was created of the man, but then the man comes from the woman. And in the Lord, they're the same. They're both needed. And I love that. But the fact is that, you see in verse 10, it says that the woman needs to have power on her head because of the angels. And I think that that's probably in reference to Satan and the fallen angels and how they deceived her. And so because of that, we have the curse and we are under the authority of our husband. So we are under the authority of our husband, just as verse 3, the husband is under the authority of Christ, just as even though Jesus was equal to God, he submitted himself to God the Father. And everything he did on earth, he would say, I'm not doing this for me, I'm doing this because of the will of God the Father. And what I think is, it gets a little bit confusing, because if the husband, or if the man is under God the Father, and if, as these commentators say, that the covering implies that the woman shows she has something over her, a power over her head, so she wears her hair as a level of submission, is an outward manifestation of an inward spirit issue. So Paul speaks of hair, but if the husband is under the head of God, then why doesn't he also have long hair? So it's that's where I think it gets confusing, because if the hair is just a symbolism of submission under authority, then you would think that the man also would have a covering to show his submission to God as his authority. And it doesn't really say that. What it comes down to is they're talking about glory. And it says in verse 7, for a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and the glory of God. And in verse 14, you can see that he's speaking of hair, because he says, it doesn't, judge amongst yourself, is it not against nature for a man to have his head covered in hair? And they're talking about women having their head shorn. If she's not under submission, she might as well just shave her head. And so that's why you're all like, wait, what? Huh? So why is it that when the man's head is uncovered, he is the image and glory of God? And it makes me wonder, does God have short hair? I don't know, because then it gets even more confusing in verse 13, where it says, judge this amongst yourselves. And then in verse 16, it says, but if any man seem contentious, we have no such custom. So it's like he's just saying this is a customary thing that isn't a hard line, matter of practice and procedure, but more that he's just making an observation. But what we do know is that he's saying that the man is the image and glory of God and reflects that relationship between God and Christ. And then it says that the hair of the woman, I'm going to read the verses, doth not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a shame unto him, but if a woman have long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given her for a covering. So you can see that our hair is given to us as a covering, but that long hair is a glory unto the woman, just as the man who submits himself and his hair isn't long, he is glory unto God. So that's why I say there's a lot more confusing things than clear things. What I would look and say conclusively is that this is a custom issue. It's a cultural issue as to whether when a woman prays, she's to have her head covered or uncovered. But when in doubt, go with what is clear, and the fact that he says that a woman's hair is a covering. And so if you are feeling uncertain, like, should I pray if my head is uncovered? Then grow your hair long, because we can see that long hair is a glory unto the woman. And that's just a biblical statement. Obviously, there are subjective, relativistic ideology as to whether a woman feels like her hair is a glory or not, but that's just your personal preference. But according to scripture, if a woman have long hair, it's not just hair, long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given her for a covering. To me, it seems a lot less like hair is symbolic of submission, because if that was the case, then it would make sense to me that the man would have long hair symbolic of his submission to the Lord. But rather, this is Paul pointing to creation, and somehow, as the man being made in the image of God, that maybe God has short hair, but the woman is given long hair as a glory to her. I am so sorry that I have nothing better to offer than that. It is confusing, but it doesn't say that women have to wear a hat to pray. It doesn't say that at all. And it doesn't say that a woman has to, wear a hat when she's out in public. It doesn't say anything like that, which is the traditions of men, how they've made it today. So if you feel that you need to have your head covered to pray, according to scripture, long hair is good enough. And that is the best I can have this side of heaven.